It was not a conscious decision. It was a slow kind of process. Like most children, I, had an imagination, and I drew and painted and so on. And the one thing, though, is I took an after-school course in grade 3, which sounds very sentimental, but it was taught by a professional artist. Her name was Kay Anglis. And she was part of the Vancouver School, sort of Beat Generation woman. So she was really quite amazing. So that was a really nice start. I knew some people who went to the art college. And I had good training in high school, as a matter of fact, as well. So I just sort of migrated into it. It was no conscious decision. My formal training was at the Alberta College of Art, as it was then called. And that was, at that time, they had just moved to the new building when I was in second year. And of course, the student body increased dramatically, and faculty. And there were a lot of new faculty from the United Kingdom and from the United States who really shook things up, because the art college at that time was pretty much an academy, highly structured, really skill-based. So these new people coming in that had varied experiences really shook things up. So the art college became far more dynamic, but still really a place where you had to work. You knew you had to work, and that was part of your understanding. You're coming to art college, you have to work. It's not a social life or a lifestyle choice. First you drew squares, and then if you were any good at that, you did still life, and that kind of thing. There was a sort of hierarchy. And we did sculpture, and we did painting. It was kind of a broad, and advertising art, as it was called at the time. But then I was completely smitten by spending time painting. So in second year, I decided to take painting. It's an interest in social history. And that's pretty much an overarching theme. It still is, even in the work that I'm producing now. And to break it down, it would be, what we do as individuals, what we can accomplish as collective, what can be made by hand, what can be made by machine. Those things I question all the time in that sort of relationship. Also, political history does enter into it, with the Hudson's Bay Blanket series and the Ireland and the Magic Lantern series of paintings about the tenant farmer evictions in Ireland in the 1880s. That certainly was a highly politicized series of events in Ireland at the time, because it was some of the first use of documentary photography ever in Ireland, which has had, of course, nearly 2,000 years of resistance to invaders, including the English still. So the photographs just struck me as so beautiful and horrible at the same time, and that's always the contradiction in visual art. Some of the most horrific events are portrayed so beautifully that it creates this very, very strange contradiction. So yeah, that was highly politicized. And then tracking Mark Gardner's trials and tribulations, almost like Homer, in the Odyssey at the Isle of Man TT motorcycle races was something I thought, here's an individual struggling to accomplish something that he had really no business doing, given his age and everything else. But it turned out to be a very rich experience and pretty, body of work. And of course, chance, coincidence is a real part of a solitary studio practice like I have, where ideas approach you almost That sounds a bit cliche, but and then you approach the idea after you get to know it, and then you process that through a series of works. Yes, I mean, I first came to think about that through a colleague at the time, and who's now a very close friend, John Chalk. Actually, I made a painting in his honor that's in the exhibition as we speak. And he'd come to the studio and looked at my work after I started scraping it off and erasing it. And he says, "Oh, these are palimpsests." And of course, I knew the term, it's sort of an echo, but I hadn't really studied it that much. So, of course, I went straight to the dictionary and read the dictionary meaning of it. And that just set me off on 10 years of activity where I erased and scraped away practically all of my inventory. I would say close to 100 works were erased and then repainted. Some of them erased again and then repainted. And each time you leave traces of the original host painting, and then you leave traces of the first intervention, and then you add on top of that, and then you can erase some of that again. So what it does is it gave me the chance to deal with production as an artist without creating more objects. I didn't see myself as General Motors. So that was a way to really negotiate the ideas of memory, finding things out underneath the surface of a painting that you'd forgotten about. And then when the painting is completely erased, you have sort of ghostly images that you can't really see. But then I was going to try to repaint that painting just from memory, from what was there. And that was an interesting challenge because it will change. Because you can't, what you've forgotten isn't necessarily what you can retrieve as memory. So that really was engaging for about 10 years. I was given some books from my family who were farmers in Manitoba, western Manitoba. And it was very interesting because there was 2 books of fiction, and all the rest were essentially manuals. Things you'd Google today, right? And that took me off on a whole tangent, and the Studies in Citizenship painting series emerged out of that. That took nearly 2 years. Well, I mean, the circumstances are important. As I say, I have a solitary studio practice that's very, very private usually. So it sets up rituals. When I'm in at 9:30 in the morning, turn on the radio because the caffeinated mind tells the hand and the eye that it's got to start doing something. So the radio comes on, the lamps come on, and then I sit and look at the previous day's work. And I have a very, very bedrock critique that I play over in my head, and I study the work accordingly. And then the caffeinated eye and mind tells the hand to get started, and then at a certain point, you kind of wonder if the hand isn't leading the eye. And then lunch comes, and then telephone calls, and check your email, go back at it, and then at 4 o'clock, you're done. Close the door, you're done. It's a work day. And that's really a result of having to stay current as a faculty member at the college for 30 years. You've got to produce work in conjunction with your teaching. This is part of an ethical equation. And then when I retired from teaching, I just had more time. And that changed things. I didn't have to multitask ever. I had weekends off. So it was all really fundamental practical concerns that retiring from a teaching commitment imposed on the work, or allowed in the work. But I've pretty much maintained, as the title suggests, Journeyman, sort of a working class, working man's approach to thinking I had a job. So it hasn't really changed. Circumstances have changed. I did make art once in Paris, in a garret, and I could see out my window, I could see the Eiffel Tower. And I thought of all of the sort of School of Paris artists at the time, particularly Picasso, who was always in his underwear, right? He was in his boxer shorts. So I tried that. Didn't make the work any better, but I felt a little bit more left bank. But I really had to force myself to work outside of my own studio space. It was very, very difficult.